Flutkatastrophe. Ein Seebeben in Südostasien.
On Boxing Day 2004, these images went around the globe and triggered a unique reaction of solidarity. Just hours later, the biggest international aid operation ever seen swung into action, and this involved the Swiss Armed Forces as well. Approaching Banda Aceh, the hub and pivotal point of the international aid operation. Tents, medicines, food, water and relief workers have arrived here in large planes and are now waiting for further transportation to areas which are still, even 4 weeks after the disaster, only accessible by air. The military part of the airport is a hive of activity. Relief goods piled up in stacks, the Indonesian army, stranded refugees, and the busy coming and going of civilian and military helicopters from all corners of the world. On some days, up to 250 aircraft movements. Although a small player in the orchestrated action by the armed forces of 17 participating nations, the Swiss helicopters of the Suma task force very soon become well-established team players, attracting praise whenever they're mentioned, thanks to their top-quality performance in transporting aid and passengers.
The 3 Swiss helicopters are crucial to our operations in Aceh in particular, because a lot of the infrastructure has been destroyed in the area. We cannot move to the field with our cars or our trucks. We're moving around Banda Aceh, but when we go to Lamno, Calang, Mullebo, the places on the coast that have been heavily destroyed, we cannot go there if it were not for the Swiss helicopters. We've been using the Swiss helicopters to transfer goods, to transfer tents, to transfer plastic sheeting, jerry cans, and also our staff who are going back and forth to the areas. We've been transferring goods from to completely destroyed little villages in the country, a little bit off the coast, and it's been completely without the helicopters we could not do that.
Today the Swiss helicopters and their crews are on permanent operations. A short discussion with the CIMIC officer. The fuel tanker driver is paid and then off they go. Their destination, a refugee camp which can only be reached by air.
500. That's good.
Lamno, 44 kilometers south of Banda Aceh. The town itself was not destroyed by the tsunami, but thousands of people fled here seeking help after the wave struck.
We have about 12,000 IDPs in Lamno. In the areas here, there are 11 IDP camps. They are all occupying the schools. What UNHCR is trying to do is provide shelter that is brought by the Swiss helicopters so that we can open up some of the camps.
At a single stroke, 12,000 more people in 11 camps in schools and tents, presenting the local authorities with huge problems.
No, the problem is now, for this area, this camp, they use one toilet for 1,000 people.
The big Swiss helicopters are already expected at the landing site, a provisionally converted football pitch. You can see what this aid means to them, not least from the toy helicopters the children have made themselves. The Indonesian army is primarily responsible for security and coordination at the landing site, and it's tight, especially when, as here, Swiss and Australians are delivering goods simultaneously. Unloading completed, the helicopter lifts off again, carrying locals who are happy to take advantage of their only chance of getting out of the region. The headquarters of the Swiss Suma contingent is located on the east coast of Medan, the capital of Sumatra. At first glance, nothing about the lively street scenes and the busy activity of the inhabitants hints at the disaster on the west coast, only about 150 kilometers away. Medan is a typical Asian city where wealth and poverty exist side by side. The small task force staff meets daily for a briefing with the commander. They discuss the lessons learned from the previous 24 hours and coordinate arrangements for the next few days. Medan Airport, military transport planes dominate the scene. And here, in a leased civilian hangar, is where the operational part of the Suma task force is located. For us, the climate in Sumatra is extreme. Brief periods of torrential rainfall, which doesn't cool things down, and the sweltering heat of between 40 and 45 degrees make all movements difficult. On doctor's orders, everyone must drink between 5 and 7 litres per day to compensate for heavy perspiration. Communications and radio links are of decisive importance for the mission, particularly in this operational area, which is bigger than Switzerland, so an ad hoc communications centre was set up. Each day, the Swiss dispatch officer Roland Staub coordinates activity with the UNHCR representative. Questions such as tonnage, type of cargo, destinations, civilian and military contacts, and many other matters need to be clarified. Once the tasks for the next 24 hours have been defined, he then plans the mission for the helicopters and their crews.
The problems here are 1, the weight of the load, and 2, the high temperatures. The helicopters are always operating at their performance limit, and the weather is unpredictable. It can change in an instant at any time, especially in the form of severe thunderstorms.
6:45 a.m., Medan Airport. Helicopter Tango 314 is the first helicopter to lift off today on its 2-day mission. Tango 311, today's second helicopter, will only lift off in 45 minutes. That's because its load, mainly tents and tarpaulins, only arrived during the night on a transport aircraft from Kuala Lumpur and are being loaded at this very moment. Because of the great distances and the fact that refuelling can only take place in Banda Aceh and Medan, additional fuel tanks have been installed in the helicopters, limiting their load capacity to 2.2 tons. The helicopters need 2 hours for the 450 kilometers over thick jungle and mountains from Medan to Mulebo on the west coast, always the first stop of the day. It's pretty tight at the landing site, but the Super Puma touches down spot on. To save time, the pilots keep the rotors turning while the sweaty work of unloading by hand is done. Rolling planning is called for, a short discussion between the crew, the UNHCR official and the Indonesian army, as plans are constantly changing. And barely 10 minutes after landing, the Puma lifts off again, fully laden with passengers heading north, destination Banda Aceh. The helicopters fly low, first over a refugee camp and then along the completely ravaged coast. The water, more than 100 million tons, swept with it everything that stood in its way, up to 7 kilometers inland. The flying time from Mulebo to Banda Aceh is roughly 45 minutes, and with every flight you notice more details. Everyone is moved by the fact that 230,000 people lost their lives here in such a short period of time. The provincial capital of Banda Aceh, on the northernmost tip of Sumatra, was hit the hardest. The extent of the devastation is enormous. The misery of the inhabitants indescribable. Whole city blocks were not just destroyed but wiped from the map. The earthquake, measuring 9 on the open-ended Richter scale, lasted 1.5 seconds, then the water came. This ship is not in the harbour. The huge volumes of water have carried it across 3 kilometres into the town. Even now, at the end of January, hospitals are still overflowing and teams of doctors are constantly at work. Banda Aceh mourns its dead in their tens of thousands, and there are over 100,000 injured. The tsunami destroyed one whole wing of the main hospital in Banda Aceh, killing both patients and staff. Here, the German Bundeswehr has established a temporary field hospital. The inhabitants dig in the remains of their houses using excavators, shovels, or their bare hands. They collect their worldly possessions while bodies are still being recovered and placed at the side of the road. The nearer to the sea you get, the more apocalyptic the scenery. Here stood the houses of 100,000 inhabitants. The 30-metre flood wave washed them away. Only the mosque remained standing. An almost uncanny silence, only the rushing of the wind and the people gathering in the mosque for silent prayer. The sweet smell of decomposing bodies lies heavy in the air, and everywhere mass graves. Distances in Sumatra are huge, and fuel is only to be had in Medan or Banda Aceh. So to increase the efficiency of our helicopters, they fly 2-day missions in rotation, either from Medan or Sabang. After a 12-hour mission and 7 hours in the air, the crew's happy to be spending the night in Sabang. Cooperation with the French is working splendidly. Now to finish off the daily servicing checks before showering and a few hours sleep. Here on Ware Island, the French army has set up an entire camp. Approach flight over Indonesian Navy amphibious landing craft lying at anchor in Celang. Celang was one of the most severely affected coastal towns. Of its 7,000 inhabitants, only 900 survived. Ten weeks have passed since the tsunami struck. Next to the helicopter landing site, a sea of clothes. In the initial chaos, this aid consignment ended up on the beach at Celang. The well-meant gift of clothes now rots in the sultry midday heat. The international organisations have convened on this spot. The reason for this concentrated mass of Western compassion is the harbour which has remained intact just below the tent city. While a few traders are offering goods for sale again, bodies are piling up behind the tents, as new victims are being recovered from the mud every day. Media reports provide plenty to talk about at home. The tsunami has brought hundreds of media people with their cameras to Sumatra. And the visit from Jakarta by our ambassador Georges Martin, who energetically assisted the Suma task force, was another topic. $1 million shots, as such scenes are called, just the sort of action a cameraman hopes for. After the 2-day mission, it's time to return to Medan. 14 flying hours, 25 landings, the sober facts behind this emotionally draining operation. The pilots discuss the missions during their daily debriefing. While outside, right next to the runway, the mechanics see to the daily servicing tasks. The hot and damp climate is a challenge not only for the crews. The technology itself is also subjected to unaccustomed stress. Major routine servicing work is carried out in the hangar. Especially for this mission in the tropics, additional maintenance documentation was obtained from the manufacturer. The extent of humidity in the air makes it hard going for the technicians, and improvisation is the name of the game. But thanks to outstanding work by all the helicopter mechanics, the Super Pumas were able to fly without interruption for the whole duration of the mission.
The UN has 12 helicopters, and so with our 3 Super Pumas, we have increased their capacity by some 30%. Really quite a considerable improvement. And what's more, we're flying. We fly between 6 and 8 hours every day, reliably, punctually. I can say with a clear conscience, our contribution is valued by the local people as well. We are there, every day, and when we say we're coming, then we really do come.
On the 27th of February 2005, after 6 weeks of operations, the Super Pumas lift off for the last time from Banda Aceh. By this first operation in a tropical region, the Swiss Armed Forces have shown that they have both the expertise and the resources to carry out, in collaboration with international partners, immediate humanitarian relief operations almost anywhere in the world. The Suma Task Force's mission on behalf of the UNHCR is over, but reconstruction has only just begun. Friday the 7th of January 2005, 11 a.m, the Parliament Building. The Federal Council's decision to agree to the UNHCR's request for assistance is announced.
This morning, the Federal Council held a short teleconference to discuss the UNHCR's request for the Swiss Armed Forces to dispatch air transport assets to support relief operations in Sumatra. The Federal Council decided to agree to this request based on the proposal put forward jointly by the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Civil Protection, Defense and Sport.
Le Conseil fédéral a décidé de donner suite à cette requête.
This operation is the first genuine mission of this type for the new Swiss Armed Forces. Personally, I'm both proud and happy to be able to carry out this mission.
The starting pistol for the first mission undertaken by the Swiss Armed Forces south of the equator has officially been fired. After that, everything happened at a breathtaking pace. At the same time, at Swissint in Stans, the advanced detachment with specialists from operations, logistics, security, communications, medical, CIMIC, PR and intelligence branches are preparing themselves for the mission.
The 10-man advanced detachment flies out to the mission area on the 8th of January. Once on Sumatra, it will have to create the appropriate conditions, both technically and logistically, for the full contingent, which will be arriving in 5 to 6 days.
Friday evening, for the last 14 hours, Air Force mechanics from Alpnach have been working in an SR Technics hangar in Kloten to prepare the 3 Super Pumas for the move to Sumatra.
We're now working round the clock. Otherwise, we would miss the only possible movement slot from Kloten next Monday morning.
The main and rear rotors, as well as the rotor head, have to be disassembled and stowed away in boxes ready for the move. It's now Sunday evening. The team at work in Kloten carefully sets about the task of loading the Super Pumas. It'll be a long night for all those involved, but early on Monday at 6 a.m, the leased Antonov 124 takes off on schedule, carrying 25 tons of cargo. On board are our 3 Super Pumas, 1 vehicle, 1 forklift truck and several tool shelters, plus 3 mechanics. The Antonov will fly from Zurich to Medan via Tashkent and Karachi in Pakistan. Flying time alone, 14 hours. At the same time at Medan Airport, Major Mariano Spada, commander of the advanced detachment, confers with the French liaison officer. The task for his men is to create within 1 week the best possible conditions for the Suma Task Force to carry out its mission on Sumatra.
Vous avez les dimensions du Manitou?
Oui, jamais. Ist, dass ihr braucht so schnell wie möglich eine Liste mit wie viele Leute runterkommen.
36 hours later, Tuesday, the 11th of January, 7 o'clock in the evening, local time, the northern sector of Medan Airport. It's not only Lieutenant Colonel Urs Kasparis, the public information officer, who's tensely awaiting the arrival of the Antonov 124. Barely has the aircraft come to a halt before senior mechanic Bjorn Hemi and Major Spada check that the helicopters have withstood the move without incurring any damage.
The flight was completely without incident. Refueling in Karachi went like clockwork. The plane took off yesterday from Zurich. It arrived here today with just a slight delay. We're delighted to have them here.
After completing the customs formalities, the Super Pumas are carefully rolled out of the transport aircraft's giant belly. The mechanics are keen to start reassembling the helicopters as quickly as possible and get them ready for operations. Back in Switzerland, Wednesday morning, 12th of January, 9:15, Stans military training area, outside temperature 4 degrees Celsius. At the Swiss Centre for International Missions, the 34 soldiers of the first contingent who will be flying to Indonesia the day after tomorrow are preparing for their mission and adding mosquito nets, water filters and many other items to the equipment they'll take with them. The question as to whether weapons are to be carried is still unresolved. First, weapons are issued and then taken back again. The definite decision is only made during the course of the day. The Suma 05 operation will be unarmed. All members of the contingent have volunteered for the mission, some of them quite spontaneously.
This is my first overseas mission. So far I've always been skeptical about overseas missions. But when Sumatra was mentioned, I said to myself, I'll go. I want to help. Because every bit of effort will be of use after such an enormous disaster.
Many of them, in particular the pilots, already have experience in missions abroad, but even so.
I'm treating this task with respect, but I'm not afraid of it. I've talked this through with my family. We're always flying missions in situations which are demanding or could become tricky. So, from that point of view, I don't expect there will be a huge difference this time.
And then mandatory vaccination for everybody is the next item on the timetable. 6 injections, including hepatitis and typhus. Prophylactic malaria tablets are also issued. What health dangers really lurk on Sumatra, nobody really knows at the moment. Meanwhile, in Medan, in the least civilian hangar, Major Mariano Spada from Ticino briefs the 16 mechanics who arrived yesterday. 38 degrees and more than 70% humidity. These are the difficult and unaccustomed climatic working conditions on Sumatra.
Acclimatization is certainly a major problem. High temperatures and humidity. Particularly for the mechanics who are really working hard, you can see the trouble they're having. It's difficult for them.
Physical work is exhausting and demands high levels of concentration. But still the mechanics work tirelessly in the sweltering heat, because at least 2 of the 3 helicopters must be operational again by Sunday.
The heat is really persistent. It's particularly bad in the morning and eases off toward evening. Will probably work well into the night, rather different from when at home.
Following the doctor's advice to drink at least 7 litres of water a day is quite challenging.
Temperatures and humidity are the most difficult thing. As you can see, everyone's bathed in perspiration. It's rather warm. You've got to drink a lot, and you notice the massive drop in physical performance. What is called for now is work deliberately, one step at a time, not rushing things.
While Tango 314, the first reassembled helicopter, is towed out of the hangar for its test flight 12,000 kilometres to the northwest, the members of the first contingent of the Suma task force are arriving at Zurich-Kloten Airport to board their flight. This afternoon, Friday the 14th of January, they'll fly to the disaster area in 2 separate groups on commercial flights. A final moment for reflection.
There are mixed feelings, a certain degree of satisfaction and of pride, but also tension. We may not know what situations will come across, but we shall be happy if we can help.
Then it's time to go. The flights are announced and the members of Task Force Suma say their goodbyes.
Of course, there is some uncertainty, but when I look at the group of 50 men who are going, I've got no worries, nothing will go wrong. After all, they're all professionals.
Medan, Monday the 17th of January, 6:30 a.m. Tango 311 and Tango 314, as well as their crews, are cleared to start this first mission in the tropics by Swiss Armed Forces helicopters. There is great media interest on this day.
The biggest unknown factor is the heat and then the distances. From here to Banda Aceh via Malabo is almost 550 kilometers, huge distances compared with Switzerland.
For this first flight, the Swiss have tents and medicines on board. The route leads westwards to Mulabo, over mountains covered in thick jungle. Then, after roughly 2 hours flying time, the landing. Helicopters from many different armed forces are taking off and landing here almost every minute, bringing in relief supplies and flying out refugees and aid workers. Frantic activity dominates the scene on the improvised landing site. While Indonesian army soldiers unload the Super Pumas, Major Werner Tarnutzer and the task force commander Colonel General Staff Yvon bring themselves up to date on the latest situation in a briefing with the local UNHCR representative.
About 3 minutes and then we will stop the engines. No problem.
A final glance at the map and then off again further to the north along the ravaged coast to Banda Aceh. Now's the time when members of the contingent get to see the effects of the tsunami with their own eyes for the first time before touching down in Banda Aceh, the hub and pivot of the international aid effort.
Sheer madness. I was almost in tears. All that was left was the foundations. Just imagine it. Men, women and children lived there. Now they've all gone. It's unbelievable.
Suddenly there's feverish activity. The helicopters need refueling, but they won't accept Werner Tarnutzer's credit card.
This morning we were told we could pay by card on the civilian side, but now that won't work. It's also rather difficult. The locals don't speak any English, but an English woman in the tower said we should go to the other side of the airport. Let's have a look. We're bound to get fuel somewhere.
But after all, fuel can still be had on the military side of the airport, not least thanks to a meeting between Georges Martin, the Swiss ambassador, and the relevant Indonesian commander. Martin has come especially from Jakarta and joined the flight today in order to introduce the Swiss military to General Mai Gen Ban Bang, because forging a good relationship is the key to such a mission.
It's important to be precise about what the Indonesians are expecting from us and what we can expect from them. Very important too is the personal relationship between the general and our own commander, Colonel Langel.
By now it's 2 o'clock. The helicopters have been fully refueled and are ready for takeoff.
The weather is constantly taking us by surprise. It changes from 1 minute to the next. It'll certainly keep us busy. Such variable weather conditions in an area we're not familiar with, it's highly demanding and we're always having to make alternative plans.
5 o'clock in the afternoon, Medan Airport. The third helicopter is being loaded up for tomorrow, as Tango 311 and Tango 314 touch down in Medan after a mission lasting almost 12 hours. A great deal has been learned and much experience gained on this first mission, and it's been an emotional day too.
Especially seeing the children in the camp we flew to makes it twice as hard. And then the heat. It's incredibly hot, even for the helicopter itself. But we are able to help, and that's something positive. But the images we see really are shocking. No matter who you ask, whether it's the general, the governor or others, we are very welcome. They need us. There are 40,000 children who have lost their parents. They are still finding 3,000 corpses each day. There are no hospitals anymore. We are really welcome, and I believe that it is the best message we can send back to Switzerland.
Welcome to you. Und ich glaube, es ist die beste Botschaft, die wir nach die Schweiz schicken können.
I believe that this is a unique contribution for a small to medium-sized country like Switzerland. I think that the Indonesians acknowledge our efforts and are grateful. For me, this mission is without a doubt a sign of the future and not a one-off operation.
C'est un jalon. C'est un premier jalon qu'on place. C'est pas une action ponctuelle, mais c'est quelque chose qui va compter pour l'avenir.
From tomorrow on, Task Force Suma 05 will be flying daily operations with their helicopters. Suma 05, the mission by our armed forces in Sumatra, was a complete success, particularly for the UNHCR, our tasking agency.
Well, the significance was that we could actually deliver emergency relief supplies to some of the most remotest areas of Aceh. Without helicopter support, without the use of the Swiss helicopters, we would not have been able to provide emergency relief materials to areas which were totally cut off and still remain cut off 2 to 3 months after the disaster. One of the great things about the Swiss helicopters was that they were so effective and so efficient that we were always trying to make sure that we had enough supplies, and it's usually the other way around, that we're always after additional air assets to move them. Here we had the air assets, and they were continually demanding us to we want more work, and that was a great attitude.
The mission was planned and carried out by the Armed Forces Joint Staff in Bern.
We
had daily contact with the desk officer, the commander or his deputy in Sumatra, Saturdays and Sundays included. Every morning we received, analyzed and processed their daily reports. At the start of the mission, we held daily operational briefings. Later, once the mission was up and running, they were held twice a week, on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
The headquarters of the Suma task force was 12,000 kilometers away in the town of Medan on Sumatra. The operational part took place in a leased hangar at the international airport. The task force, with its upper limit set at 50 by the Federal Council, will be under the local operational command of Colonel General Staff Yvon Langel. Here at a glance the most important elements in the operational area: Task Force Commander, Operations Maintenance and Logistics. As Task Force Commander, Colonel General Staff Yvon Langel has command responsibility within the operational area, he accompanied the helicopters on their first flight in order to gain a first-hand impression.
Our partners, the UNHCR and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, are very satisfied with our work. It is chaotic here, and we need to work in a structured way, to a strict timetable and systematically, and we can.
In daily briefings with his staff, he decides on the tasks that need to be dealt with and responds to the constantly changing situation.
The success of any mission depends on leadership. The commander and all members of the contingent need to understand that rank is irrelevant in such an operation. When we're flying, the pilot is number one. When carrying out servicing, it's the mechanic. As for planning, it's the commander and his staff.
Quand on entretient, c'est le mécanicien numéro 1. Quand on organise, c'est le commandant et son état-major.
His deputy is an Air Force officer who's also responsible for all specifically Air Force operational aspects.
Because of our, in inverted commas, slim organization, we are very flexible. We have no difficulty in keeping up with other contingents and are highly valued, mainly due to our straightforward procedures.
Our armed forces have broken new ground with this operation, particularly with regard to legal questions and situations in the operational area.
We are on an official mission here. In other words, we're not tourists. Switzerland has made an agreement with Indonesia which regulates our status. This agreement confirms our status as military personnel. It also determines that we are not allowed to carry weapons, that we serve in uniform, and the question of liability has also been defined. This type of mission is unique, in such an unusual location, with so little time to prepare. For me, as the legal advisor, this means more than anything else being extremely flexible.
The head of the military's security contingent is also on the task force staff.
At the moment, there are 10 of us in the detachment. Our main task is acting as security escorts for the helicopters. And then, when on the ground, it's surveillance, observation, and protecting sensitive material. And our third function is providing a standby team to give support in various tasks. One aspect is the rebels. There are reports of them in the media. However, they are not in our area, so they don't pose a direct danger to us. One problem, in inverted commas, is the masses of people when the helicopters touch down. We have to take the essential safety measures within the helicopter's danger area. The day before yesterday, for example, we landed on an open field and straight away a crowd of 200 to 300 people gathered.
Another important function is that of the public relations officer, as this mission has triggered great media interest, and so Lieutenant Colonel Urs Kasparis is also on the staff.
Yesterday we enjoyed an initial success, which happened more by chance than anything else. In Banda Aceh we met a CNN team who wanted to file a report on the Swiss operation because they had heard that the Swiss were providing the most reliable service. So after just 1 week on operations, our detachment is preceded by its good reputation. I'm keen to know how the report will turn out. An important factor is internal information. After the great media scrum, it's a question of keeping our people up to date with the latest events. We managed to do this by using a giant notice board on which we display the most important news from the whole world.
As well as various different armed forces, innumerable international relief organizations are represented in the disaster area. And so, whenever possible, Lieutenant Colonel Urs Löffel, the Swiss officer responsible for CIMIC, attends the staff briefings.
We cooperate at two levels. One is bilateral collaboration with the UNHCR, our main tasking agency. The other is multilateral collaboration. There is daily coordination meeting, which I also attend, and where military and civilian personnel discuss current problems. I can give a positive report. We enjoy equal rights and sit at the same table as the Americans. And even though, compared with the resources, ours are rather modest, we are able to maintain our position here and are treated as equals. We are constantly trying to optimize our effort, to fly the right things at the right time. We've no need to hide our lights under any bushel.
Colonel General Staff Yvon Langel wants to have first-hand information, so he has members of the contingent give him daily updates whenever possible. Close cooperation, particularly with his French counterpart, is part of his task, and the same goes for contacts with other armed forces.
We were immediately accepted. We have a common objective, We're working for the same reason, a humanitarian one. There is terrific cooperation, almost a brotherly relationship. I've met my counterparts from the other armed forces and we have a common goal, to support this humanitarian relief task as unarmed soldiers. This provides absolutely no difficulties. We see things exactly the same way. This is a first for us as well, and relations between Switzerland and France are very good. We are from the same profession and have the same task. I expect things to go very well.
The second element is operations and maintenance. The task is obvious: transfer of goods on behalf of the UNHCR.
It's a simple concept. A helicopter starts from Medan, remains the whole day in the area of operations, spends the night in the camp on Way Island, and returns at the end of the next operational day. So the crew is on the go for 2 days.
But as well as the actual business of flying, it's preparation, servicing and maintenance which present the challenge, especially in this tropical climate.
Heli business is teamwork. Both pilots and mechanics are required.
And it's not only on Sabang that teamwork's called for. Altogether, there are 12 mechanics on this operation, including 1 avionics technician. After every flight back at the main base in Medan, the pilots debrief about any incidents with Christoph Hess, the chief mechanic.
Some of the avionics displays act crazy. The electrical system displays, for example, the pressure collapses for 2 minutes and is then suddenly normal again. We're not used to that at home. Here we've got to live with it. Just keep calm.
And the mechanics mustn't be put off by heat, humidity, lack of space or working hours.
At home we work a 5-day week. Here we work a continuous 7 days a week.
The Suma task force totals 50 members of the armed forces, and this active service mission demands rapid decision-making and a steep learning curve from all those involved.
Problems which we have here but do not get at home are fuel problems. At the moment we can't get any fuel. Why, I don't know. And to find out why we would need mobile phone connection, which right now is down. So we shall have to wait.
The mission demands the greatest flexibility from everyone. Every day provides new challenges.
Tasking is coordinated from in here. I sit together with the UNHCR, monitoring their requirements and ours, like this. How much can I offer, compared how much they want to have flown, and together we work out a solution.
And last but not least, logistics.
It is the sum total of unfavorable elements. We are in a country where, at present, because of the earthquake, conditions are chaotic. We are far away from Switzerland, particularly problematic for logistics. And we are with people whose language we don't speak and whose culture we don't know. All combined, this generates great difficulties. The organization requires planning on a daily basis.
When the advanced detachment arrived, there was nothing here. For the task to be carried out successfully, the operations base in Medan had to be set up in record time. All the logistics materials were delivered from Switzerland on board an Ilyushin.
We live from hand to mouth. We have to take each day as it comes. What is noticeable is the much slower pace of life. You have to watch yourself and your body. Keep taking in water when you're sweating so much. You have to adjust to the Indonesian rhythm. Simply slower. According to the motto, if not today, then tomorrow.
The main thing is that it should work. And with typically reliable Swiss precision, First Lieutenant Bruno Berlin refuses to be distracted from his job and finds a way of unloading everything: containers, the pooch, the Manitou, and the rest of the equipment. And he achieves the almost impossible. In just 6 days, the Medan operations base is established.
Sensational, when you consider how little time the advanced detachment had. When we arrived 5 days ago, we found a hangar, overnight accommodation, we even got briefings from the test pilot. Just sensational what they achieved in those few days.
While the helicopters are being reassembled, it's now time to set up the command and control systems.
We've got two main tasks when it comes to ensuring command and control systems. One is the communications link between base and the helicopter. Because going north, the helicopter is flying over thick jungle for an hour. It must be able to talk to base at any time, in case a problem crops up. We make this link with the HFSE 430 radio, and it works.
A logistician's job is never done. The tasks are constantly changing, or new ones are forever turning up.
My biggest challenge as a logistician is providing everybody with everything. Whether it's the colonel or a private soldier, I want everyone to be satisfied. And that's not just here. I'm also supplying Bern with the information they need.
Bruno Berlin sees to all the logistic requirements. Whether it's water or moving pallets or emptying waste bins, he constantly makes sure that things are shipshape. And our French comrades also benefit from his talents. Having initially organised tents for them, he's now discussing details with his French counterpart for setting up a camp in Sabang.
Here in the hangar, the main support base, I carry out a daily duty tour. And occasionally I go off procuring materials and buying things locally. Whether it's handkerchiefs, screwdrivers or nuts, mostly stuff for the mechanics. And sometimes for the military security people as well. In short, if it's to do with hardware, I'll provide it.
The quartermaster, Captain Patrick Hunziker, is also going the same way. We find him in a large bank in Medan, changing dollars into local currency.
You can only pay cash here. There is no such thing as invoices with a payment slip.
That also applies to Bruno Berlin, our man for all seasons.
Also für mich sehr eindrücklich ist das Ausmaß von dieser Zerstörung. Ich kann über 150 Kilometer dieser Küsten entlang fliegen und ist einfach auf einem Streifen bis 3 Kilometer, bis mehr sogar noch ins Landesinnere, ist einfach alles plattgefegt.
È soprattutto l'impatto psicologico che si ha nel vedere quello che è successo. Voliamo per 300-400 km su delle zone distrutte. Questo da noi non sappiamo neanche cosa vuol dire.
Le militaire est d'abord un homme avec des émotions. Et ici, on doit le montrer que nous sommes des hommes avec des notions militaires, techniques, électronique, mais en même temps, on doit montrer des émotions. Celui qui n'a pas d'émotion n'a pas sa place dans un engagement tel que celui-ci.
Das ganze Ausmaß, das die Tsunami-Katastrophe mit sich gebracht hat, vor allem die zerstörerische Gewalt, die das Ganze niedergemetzelt hat, kann man sagen. Es ist unglaublich. Die Bilder im Fernsehen bringen nicht das über, was man live vor Ort zu Gesicht bekommt.
À ma fille qui m'avait dit avant que je parte, papa, tu vas aider les vivants de la vague. Ce qui m'amène à dire que mon impression principale, c'est qu'on sent l'envie de vivre des gens. Ils sont dans un chaos complet, mais l'envie de vivre est là. Et le fait qu'ils nous aient vus, ça leur a peut-être apporté du baume au cœur, mais en tout cas, ils ont vu concrètement qu'on leur apporte notre aide. Bien, c'est qu'en étant sur Banda Aceh, on assiste à un décor digne d'Hiroshima. Et on voit des gens là, ils sont très peu, parce que beaucoup sont morts. Beaucoup sont encore ensevelis sous les gravats. C'est que la vie commence et recontinue et que le courant normal, à tout prix, c'est une volonté, on le sent chez ces gens, ils veulent revivre à tout prix.
Penso che mi ha impressionato il fatto che una piccola nazione come la Svizzera, con un piccolo contingente di 50 persone, possa fare il lavoro che abbiamo fatto qua, dimostra che la nostra formazione, la nostra flessibilità ci caratterizza in un ingaggio del genere.
Sicher eindrücklich, wenn man Flüchtlinge fliegt, das Leid und zum Teil auch die Trauer, die man sieht von diesen Menschen. Aber trotzdem auch der positive Gedanke dazu, also die sind positiv eingestellt, sie sind überall wieder am Aufbauen, sie helfen. Und hier und wieder kann man auch ihnen ein Lächeln schenken oder auch wir können das Lächeln zurück.
Ganz klar, das Lachen von diesen Kindern, von diesen Leuten, wenn man Hilfe bringt, das bringt einem persönlich so viel, das kann man nicht beschreiben.
Positive Erfahrung oder für mich persönlich die positivste Erfahrung ist sicher, dass man einen kleinen Teil hat dazu beifügen, dass es den Menschen wieder besser geht in Zukunft.
Mais c'est sûr que les deux raisons, c'est pouvoir venir aider et puis je crois que ça résume tout, quoi. C'est l'argument principal.